Hey, what's going on, everyone? Hope everyone is doing well. I'm just going to give it like a minute or two and let people jump in. Of course, running like 2 minutes late myself. Hope everyone's having a good weekend, though. So I got my, standard traditional morning coffee. Jesus, good to see you, man. Thanks for jumping in. I saw some other people jumped in as well. So I got my organic morning coffee, of course, drinking it out of glass all the time. Bob, good to see you as well. Thanks for always jumping in and being a member of the group already for a long time. Hope all is well. Let me know what's new in your guys' corner. Um, Hope everyone's having a good weekend. Paul, the legend himself, is in the house. Good to see you as well, and congrats on finishing your fat loss journey and kind of moving on to the next phase. Donald, good to see you. Bob, hope all is well, man. Let me know what's new. I always see you kind of jumping in on these, but I don't know how life is going in your corner. Jeremy, good to see you as well. So once again, organic coffee. Costco actually has a really good deal on organic coffee right now, like a pretty good size bag for like 10 bucks. And I bought a few of them. And I always try to drink it out of glass. That's important, because you don't want, Donald, good to see you. Jeremy as well. Uh, Paulo, let me know if I pronounced your name correct. Sorry if I got that wrong. Um, Brandon, good to see you. Let me know what's going on with you and what you got planned for the weekend. So yeah, Costco has a good deal on organic coffee if that's even a concern for you. I always try to drink it out of glass as well, just to reduce your exposure to all those kind of like estrogenic chemicals. It's an easy fix, all right, guys, and it's an easy way to kind of take some synthetic toxins out of your system, which will kind of help you in a long enough time frame quite a bit on reducing your toxic load. And one easy way to do that is just to not drink anything out of plastic, and also ideally try not to eat anything out of plastic. In particular, like heated food, so like heating anything in a microwave in plastic, or drinking any hot liquid in plastic as well. So as you guys can see, the coffee is kind of hot, but you're drinking that out of glass or stainless steel is a good way to reduce those estrogenic chemicals. So yeah, love Costco. Yeah. They also have like a great seasoning brand that I promote on here as well. Not getting any kickbacks at all. Just kind of like their brand. Lewis, good to see you and promoting it. So let's get started today. We'll kind of go down the list. And this is a topic like I really like talking about because I like creating automated systems. Just as a hobby, it's one of my passions of making things like more efficient, et cetera, et cetera. And in particular, to make sure your health and wellness goals don't take up too much time. So in the conversation today, we'll be talking about, the theme is time economics, because oftentimes I hear people say like, and it's true in some cases, like I don't have time to work out, or I don't have time to meditate an hour a day, or this and that. Or even in some cases, if people do have time, um, they're kind of just worn out, you know what I mean? And they're just really worn out at the end of the day, and they don't have enough energy to actually attend to their mental and physical goals. So I'm going to talk about various strategies that are realistic, and literally anyone that this interests can start applying this right away. It doesn't take like a high IQ or an elaborate understanding, and they can see a lot of time free up in their week, because obviously, um, if you have a tremendous amount of going on during the week and you're very distracted, et cetera, that's going to make it really tough for you to get into the gym. Or even if you are in the gym, you kind of like feel like very rushed or very anxious, like, oh, I got to get these sets out of the way really quick because I got to get back to work, or I got to get this finished or that finished, et cetera, et cetera. And we want to try to avoid those scenarios as much as possible. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to divide this into two different topics, and we're just going to go down one topic at a time and then tackle the other topic completely. And the second topic will be divided into two subtopics, okay? So the first topic is just to kind of free up a lot of hours you have in your day. And of course, it's going to depend on your goals. Like, what are your goals first and foremost? And then you can determine like how much time those goals will take. So obviously that's tough for me to kind of like explain to you guys, because everyone is different, of course. Everyone's goals are different, and thus the amount of time to accomplish those goals are going to vary. But let's kind of look over just the average weekly schedule and then kind of go from there. So everyone has 168 hours in a week. So obviously, let's presume you're working 40 hours a week, which is a normal work schedule. You're sleeping 8 hours a day, which most people aren't doing. I mean, the average American is sleeping probably like 5.5 hours to 5 hours a day. But let's presume ideally you are sleeping 8 hours a day. So that's 56 hours a week. And let's save about 15 hours a week to socializing, hanging out with friends and family, et cetera, et cetera. 15 hours, which basically almost no one does as well, but I'm trying to be like very optimistic here. And then let's also save 5 hours for errands. So we got 40 hours for work, 56 hours for sleep, 5 hours for errands. 5 hours for errands and 15 hours for socializing, hanging out with friends, etc., etc. So after all that is said and done, which is kind of like your typical schedule for the typical person, of course, everyone's going to vary a bit. You have 2 full days and about 4 to 16 hours of free time every single week. 2 full days and 4 to 16 hours of free time every single week. Once again, depending on some small variations in the calculations above. So the reason I'm bringing this up is what kind of time investment is required to really optimize like your mental and physical health. I'm not talking about for the Olympics. I'm just talking about for the average person to develop like a really good looking physique that's healthy, and then for them to have enough time to also attend to their mental health as well. So for the average person, you're looking at about like 10 to 11 hours of invested time per week. So 10 to 11 hours, and I kind of divide that roughly into 5 hours of working out and physical training time, and then also 5 hours of just all the other background stuff that's required to accomplish that. So it's basically like 10 to 11 hours a week. So even with all that said and done, I mean, a person optimizing their mental and physical health, a person working 40 hours a week, sleeping 8 hours a day, hanging out with friends and family 15 hours a week, having even 5 hours a week for running errands, getting in 5 workouts, also, having enough time to prep their meals, go to the grocery store, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, on average, and of course, this is going to vary from person to person, you have about like 2 full days of free time available every single week. So it's basically around like 48 hours of free time every single week. So even with that kind of compacted schedule, you have like still quite a bit of time, even after optimizing your aesthetics, optimizing your mental health, physical health, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of people, the next thing would be, a lot of people will be like, well, shoot, that's roughly how my schedule looks like, but I don't feel like I have that much free time that he's describing. And the reason for that is a lot of people don't have automated systems when it comes to their health and wellness goals. So they end up taking up too much time to accomplish those goals. And obviously there are a lot of distractions, et cetera, et cetera. So let's break these down. And here are some quick time economic strategies that pretty much anyone can apply. And I coach a lot of my clients on this stuff as well. And I post a lot of transformations almost weekly, many every single week. And one of the parts of the program is really emphasizing these kind of automated systems. And they really do help free up a lot of time in a person's schedule so that they have more time for themselves. Because often, if you're obviously distracted with a lot of other stuff in life, it's going to make it tough for you to A, have the energy, or B, have the extra time to focus on yourself, et cetera, et cetera. So here's some quick like meal prep options. A lot of people get meal prep tactics, time economical tactics. A lot of people get really fixated on just spending too much time meal prepping. So one thing I like to do is, like, for example, there's kind of like a fly flying around here. It's like distracting me a little bit. But for example, one thing I like to do is, let's say, here's my morning routine. So I get up in the morning, I have a cup of coffee, I kind of sit down and drink that cup of coffee, give it about like 30 minutes or so, then go to the bathroom, then drive to the gym, which takes about like 20 minutes or so. I'm fully, woken up by the time I get to the gym. I work out for like an hour, hour and a half. If I do stretching, like maybe a little bit longer. And then I get home, and what I do then is basically I throw my rice in the rice cooker, and whatever food I calculated for that day, so it's typically like a quantity of meat, let's say 2 pounds of meat and like a few cups of vegetables, I throw in like a pantry and then put it in an air fryer or an oven. and basically let it cook there while I'm taking a shower. So I put seasoning on it and all that stuff and just kind of throw it in there. And I'm in the shower while that's cooking. It typically takes like, 25, 30 minutes to finish, which is roughly the amount of time it takes me to finish my shower and getting ready in the morning and all that stuff. And then basically, by the time I get out of the shower and I'm all ready, um, all my meals are ready for the day. And then I just kind of put them in a container. And then as the day goes on, I just basically eat them as the day goes on. So it's like really the only time I cook throughout the day. I try to avoid strategies where you're hovering around the stove. So for example, the items you pick are also extremely important. So I try to avoid eggs, cooking eggs, because you have to inevitably be in front of the stove and kind of cooking the eggs and watching them, et cetera, et cetera. And that kind of takes up time. And I'm more over in the mindset of how could I just automate this as much as possible. So rather I would pick, like, for example, today I'm eating duck for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's even what I had for dinner with like a mix of vegetables and also just some brown rice with some seasoning as well on the side. So that's pretty much every single one of my meals, which is another tip. You can vary your meals quite a bit, but I try to kind of stick to the same meal per day. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it's duck, vegetables, and rice for today. Tomorrow, it's beef, vegetables, and rice, or something like that. And then the third day, it's going to be like fish, vegetables, and rice, and stuff of that sort. Um, you can if you want, it's personal preference, but at the end of the day, don't feel like you have to have so much variety every single day. Just as long as you have a general sense of variety in your food is good enough. So kind of keep that in mind as well. So once again, the idea is you want to avoid really just kind of having to hover around the stove. That's huge. So what I use is an air fryer. Once again, get home, just basically throw the food in there, and then while I'm taking a shower, it's cooking. And then by the time I'm done, it's all ready. Another option you can do is basically have a pressure cooker. That's another option, especially if you're into like more bone broths. So you can put a bunch of bone broth in there, throw in, let's say you calculated like 2 pounds of meat for the day, like 4 cups of vegetables and like a cup of rice. You throw all in that in the pressure cooker as well. And just ideally, like what I like to do is in that scenario, I would let it cook during the night. So it's about, like a slow cook, 7, 8 hours. And then when you wake up in the morning, it automatically switches to keep warm, obviously. But when you wake up in the morning, it's all ready for you for the whole entire day. This especially works well if you work remote, because you could actually just keep it in there and kind of pick at it throughout the day. So let's say you have like 4 meals a day. You just kind of pick a quarter of that every single time until it basically runs out towards the end of the day. So that's another option that can save you a tremendous amount of time, maybe an hour or two a day. So let's say on the low end, an hour a day, 7 days a week, that's 7 hours. That's a full workday right there, saved. Imagine, having 7 more hours of free time every single week. It kind of adds up pretty quickly, okay? And so for some people, even more, they spend even more time in the kitchen. So let's say on the higher end, it's like 2 hours a day, times 7, that's 14 hours of saved time if you just kind of automated this kind of cooking system. Of course, you could do meal prep companies and stuff of that sort, but they tend to be expensive. They also tend to be served in plastic, and the ingredients are typically kind of like factory farmed, low quality raw ingredients. So it's up to you on that one. The time economics is definitely there. You just kind of throw it in the microwave or whatever you use. I personally try not to use a microwave, or I don't ever use a microwave actually. But then you just heat it up and you eat it. So that could obviously save you quite a bit of time. But the system I described is also basically the same exact system, but you can use much higher quality ingredients, and it's much less expensive than a meal prep company. So that's what I personally use. Okay. Obviously, grocery store as well, and this works well with meal prepping. So I try to go to the grocery store like once a week. And I have like an Excel chart that tells me exactly how much food I need per day, which I also use them with my clients. And then you just multiply by 7, and that's how much food you need for the whole entire week. And then you just go to the grocery store and you know exactly how much you need to buy for the whole entire week. And I would personally buy it for the whole entire week, and then you never have to return back to the grocery store again. because it takes quite a bit of time. If you think about, driving to the grocery store, parking there, walking around, getting in line, having to pay, taking the groceries, putting it in your car, driving it back to your house, taking it out of your car, then rearranging it in your refrigerator. It could be an easy like hour or two a session. And let's say you're going to the grocery store twice a week instead of once. There you go. You just lost another hour or two. Plus, if you're not meal prepping, kind of like as an example of what I said before, that's another 7 hours. So you're at negative 9 hours already. So you're really chipping away and losing those available hours, thus making you feel like more rushed throughout the day, because you obviously have less time and more things to do. Also, that's another thing. You just want to kind of declutter your schedule and have a lot less going on in your schedule. And that helps also reduce the amount of like micro stresses throughout your week as well, which could help with energy, decreasing your anxiety, just letting your central nervous system relax a little bit and not have to do so much. So there are a lot of benefits to creating these systems. So grocery store once a week. You could also just have your groceries delivered rather. So for example, um, Whole Foods Fresh or Amazon Fresh, I think is what they call them. I find them like a very reliable service. I've been using them a lot. It's like $10, and in most areas they can deliver to your house for $10. Plus you give a little bit of a tip. Sure, it's $10 more than what you would have paid if you go yourself. But if you really calculate the cost of gas driving over there and then also the lost time, that hour that it takes you to go to the grocery store could be worth more to you than $10, for example. That's up to you to evaluate. But that's just another thing you can do that could even save you another hour or two a week. So on there, you just calculate once again how much you need for the day, and then you multiply by 7, and then order for a week in advance, and then boom, you're set to go. You got all your food for the week, and then you kind of use that time economical strategy of using the air fryer, the pressure cooker, the oven, et cetera, to cook your food while you're taking a shower or doing other activities. So you can optimize your time a lot more. You can use that time to do other stuff, that's more important to you. Or more importantly, I think you can use that time just to rest more and not feel so bombarded through the week, or that you have like so much stuff that needs to be done, which is typically like exhausting if you do that like week after week after week. And a lot of people in America fall into those traps. It's like they feel like they don't have enough me time. They always got like stuff to do, and they're probably running on low energy already, which makes it even tougher to do that stuff, which kind of exhausts you even more. And it's kind of like a vicious cycle downward. And in a long enough time frame, it could be one thing that basically disrupts your HPA regulation, which then sends your hormones all out of whack, then makes you feel worse and makes you adapt more maladaptive behavior, which leads to more poor lifestyle and nutritional choices, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, this isn't all just coming from poor time economics, but poor time economics and allocation is one of the variables that I consistently see that leads to people to a lot of troubles with their mental and physical health. So another thing that could save you a lot of time, and what I found actually very beneficial for a majority of reasons, is basically just to stop watching news of any sort on any channel, whether it be Fox News, CNN, NBC, ABC, whatever. I don't know the myriad of channels on YouTube as well. I don't even know who's out there these days. But personally, I just stopped watching news. And this alone, and once again, it's variable from person to person, but this alone can save you, 2 hours to even more, 5, 6, 7 hours a week. So now, like, check it out. We started meal prepping, right? We started only going to the grocery store once a week. So that saved us, let's say, an hour. We started doing, using the air fryer, the pressure cooker, the oven, etc., to make all our meals quick for us. Let's say that saved us 7 hours. So we're at 8 hours there. And then let's say we cut out news on the low end. Let's say it's 2 hours a week total, checking out those feeds on Yahoo or online or whatever. So we're at like 10 or 11 hours of free time now per week. I'm going to write that down so I don't forget it actually. 10 to 11 hours of free time per week. So see, it's starting to add up quite a bit. And remember in the beginning of our conversation, I mentioned that it takes about 10 to 11 hours to really optimize your mental and physical health and appearance for the average person per week. So there you go. There is the time difference that you really need to optimize your mental and physical health right there, just by doing those small things. Meal prepping, not meal prepping in the sense that getting all your meals ready, but using the air fryer, using the pressure cooker, going to the grocery store once a week, just not watching the news. Who cares about the news? Because it's all going to be biased no matter what channel you watch. I think the opposing views, I think like CNN is probably way different than Fox. I forget already, but both of them are biased, and whatever you're going to watch, they're always going to be incentivized by their affiliates or whoever is advertising with them to spread a certain type of message. Then there is also personal bias on the reporter's part. And no matter how objective like a reporter tries to be, there's always some kind of subjective spin on it or their viewpoint on it that's going to bias the story in some way or another. So you're always never really going to get the total accurate picture of what's going on. You're just going to get one viewpoint unless you're watching a myriad of these channels all at once and then trying to piece everything together, plus doing a lot of research on your own, which takes a lot of time, and which goes back to the real question of like, it's basically useless information for the majority of people, for probably who's listening to this live right now. Because, okay, let's say we have this thing going on in Ukraine right now. I actually spent around 10 years living in Ukraine, so I have nothing negative about that conflict or anything, but it's like for the average person listening to the news every day on that, it's like, what are you going to do? Okay, you'll learn a bunch of facts. They'll take up a lot of your time. They'll take time away from activities that could really benefit you and make you a better person, et cetera, make you a better contributor to society and make society better, which will have less problems, et cetera, et cetera. But even if you learn a lot about like Ukraine, like, what are you going to do? Are you going to go volunteer there? Are you going to go join the military there? Are you going to become a politician and change policies over there? Are you a billionaire and can contribute money to a certain cause over there? Like, if you're not any of those things, and if you have no interest in that, like, what's the point of wasting so much time watching all that stuff and learning all those facts, which really don't have any benefit for you personally in terms of like what specifically you're trying to achieve? There's literally no benefit. It's a waste of time. And I guarantee you, let's say you're watching the news, 2 hours a week, let's say on the low end, 2 hours a week. Don't you think that 2 hours could have been better spent on reading a book that can benefit you in like your career, or maybe some kind of book on psychology, or even if you just want to relax, some kind of, fairy tale book of any sorts, just to kind of ease your mind and give yourself some more me time, so it doesn't feel like you're always working, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, wouldn't you, or spending 2 more hours at the gym, for example, or going for a nice, long, relaxing walk? Like, wouldn't you feel that stuff would benefit you way more than just learning something else about Ukraine? Like, oh, the military took this town and that town. Okay, cool. Like, that stuff. Like, what are you going to do with that information now? Nothing. You're not going to do anything with it. And you just wasted another 2 hours on irrelevant information, irrelevant for you, not irrelevant in the sense that it's not meaningful in general, but it's like, just attend your attention and energy to things that you're actually going to change, or you're going to be cluttered with a bunch of negative information. And, the news is most always negative, most always blown out of proportion as well, most always biased. So you're going to get a distorted sense of like whatever is going on anywhere, whether it's with a virus or whether it's a war or conflict somewhere else, et cetera, et cetera. All I'm just getting at is you can save a lot of time, 2 hours a week at a minimum. I'd say 4 hours for most people per week. And even on the 4 hour range, that's really already as much time as you need to get an amazing 4 workouts in during the week, which is really all you need for the most part if you're not looking to be like a Mr. Olympia or anything, and just kind of like an average person looking to look pretty good and feel pretty good and just be healthy in general from a workout perspective. So another big time drain is obviously social media, and a lot of people use social media as a form of dissociation. They kind of just numb themselves out from a possible lifestyle that's too fast paced or that they don't want, or work project that's too stressful. They're like, oh, I'm too stressed. and I'm gonna, go on TikTok and cruise around the videos or on YouTube or whatever. And I'm going to just do it for 5 minutes, but 5 minutes turns into an hour, it turns into 2 hours, and you're like, oh, where did the time go? And then and instead of allocating that time to decreasing those micro stresses or whatever is kind of a sense of energy of emptiness that's bothering you inside, that's leading you to kind of be overwhelmed instead of solving it at the root cause, kind of just wasted a lot of time just on numbing yourself out with social media and stuff of that sort. And then on there, you get a distorted sense of reality too. Um, Obviously, a lot of social media influencers are just portraying a picture of not reality for the most part, but that's all you see because a lot of those profiles become very popular. And then you kind of sometimes get into the idea that that's just how everyone is doing. Everyone has these cars and whatever else, and I'm just working this 8 hour job and stuff of that sort. And that's not helping you at all either. And social media alone can probably save you a minimum of like 10 hours a week. 10 hours a week for sure, no problem. And you guys, anyone with like a smartphone, Android, iPhone, just check your app history or whatever social media history. I don't know what those are called, but it'll give you a good rundown of how much time you're spending on social media every single week. And I bet you a lot of you are spending at least like 5 hours a day on it, if not more. So that's 30 hours a week already. That's 30 hours a week. And let's say if we didn't use those meal prep, ideas, that's already 37 hours lost a week. If we didn't go to the grocery store only once, that's already 38 hours lost time. If we didn't watch the news or if we didn't stop watching the news, that's already, 40, 42, 43 hours of lost time per week. So of course, no wonder you feel overwhelmed and you don't have time to go to the gym and sleep enough and stuff of that sort. How can you when you're allocating all of this time to all of these activities that are really like not even benefiting you at all? If you really honestly evaluate them, they're adding literally no value to your life, but draining just so much of your time every single week, every single week. So I really don't believe when people say they don't have enough time to work out, to sleep well, to attend to their mental goals, to have more me time. I don't believe it. And if you guys, it's the weekend, if you guys really do a good accounting of where your hours are going this weekend and be honest with yourself, which most people are never going to be, and that's why they live a life full of obesity, misery, and disease, and then blame it, do something silly and stupid like blame it on their genetics or something of that sort. But if you're honest and do all of this accounting and time economics, you will see that there's a lot of time that's spent on nothing. That's spent on rather nothing that's meaningful to you at this moment in your life, and way more than enough time than the 10 hours you need to optimize your mental and physical health and appearance, like I mentioned in the beginning. Okay, so remember, you only need roughly that amount of time per week to really optimize your mental and physical health. And for the example we mentioned earlier, this person is spending 40 hours a week on BS stuff. 40 hours a week. 40 hours a week on social media, watching the news, cooking their meal by meal, stuff of that sort, going to the grocery store multiple times a week, other forms of distractions that are used as dissociation, typically with electronics these days is very, very common. They have totally enough time. 100% they have enough time, okay? There's only 17 years of coaching people. I've run into a few executives that are pushing like 70-hour weeks, 80-hour weeks. Then there's the aspect of not having enough energy for sure. And then there's also the complexity of their work that kind of distracts them mentally and causes it tough to focus on themselves, et cetera, et cetera. There are so many other variables to consider. But as you can see, just from an average layout, I mean, imagine a person came up to me and they're like, I don't have enough time to work out. I'm too busy. And I guarantee you they'll fit into this category of spending, a couple of hours on social media and the news per day. Just once again, even on the low end, like 1 hour a day, which everyone is spending way more than that, that's already 7 hours a week. That's already pretty much all the time you need to optimize your mental and physical health. And they're like, well, I'm not going to be informed. But once again, it goes back to what informed about what? Like, how is that benefiting you at all? Informed about what exactly, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot more to go on that. But oftentimes also I find, unless a person is in extreme form of denial, oftentimes I find when people say, I don't have enough time for my mental and physical health or my goals, it's usually just like a form of like it's like an excuse, you know. And I got this from Robert Kiyosaki, and it's a great saying, but excuses are oftentimes used as a form of escape from responsibility, personal responsibility, because to having an excuse is easy. You know, it's easy to say like, oh, I don't have time, you know what I mean, when you're kind of overweight and unhealthy and feel crappy and are a bunch of like dangerous medical drugs such as high blood pressure medication, statins, antidepressants, etc., etc. And it's easy to say like, I don't have time to attend to these things and fix these problems. It's easy, but it just provides a short-term relief and doesn't really give you a solution, which is what you actually really want and need, which actually might be sometimes tough to figure out, but it's what needs to be done if you really want to, you know, be happy and be at ease and be at peace in life. You know what I mean? Screw the whole I have to be successful and world dominating thing. Just establish peace and happiness in your life first and foremost, and then kind of build upon that. Use that as a base frame to your motivations and actions, etc., etc. So, time economics, very important. Takeaways here are most people have way more than enough time to accomplish their mental and physical health goals. It's just all about being conscious of where those hours are being allocated, taking them away from activities that don't benefit you at all, and reallocating them to activities that do benefit you quite a bit, okay? So remember we mentioned this conversation is going to be divided into two different aspects. So that was the one time in terms of how to objectively have better time economic practices to have more available time per week. And I think that's fair to say pretty much all the stuff I mentioned, anyone can do at pretty much any stage in their life, and it's no problem, okay? Um, Stuff of that sort. Obviously, I kind of didn't include kids for those people that do have kids. I kind of put kids under the socializing banner, which is 15 hours a week. You know, if you do have kids, it may take 20 hours a week. But still, if you calculate the times, it still gives you way more than enough time to attend to your mental and physical health goals. And then on top of that, if you're really letting yourself go and you're putting your mental and physical health goals second and you're just very overweight, very tired, very grouchy, like you're going to teach your kids to be the same exact way. Because remember, kids learn 80% of what kids learn from you is just by observing you, not even what you tell them. So obviously, if they see you all beat up on a bunch of medical drugs, you know, uh, short-tempered, not having enough me time, not sleeping well, they're going to grow up doing the same exact thing as well because they're looking up to you as a role model of how to function in the world appropriately, you know, because they see you as this idol, almost this demigod in a young enough age, and they really try to just mimic what you're doing. So if you're mimicking unhealthy mental and physical health patterns, they're going to do the same exact thing. Okay, so that's from that perspective. Obviously, you know, having enough time is important, but also having enough energy is important as well. And that topic dives into, moreover, like central nervous system management, which we're going to break down into two different categories. So let's break down in one first category is this way. Ideally, I mean, the central nervous system has, you know, the Homo sapien has been around for like 200,000 years, maybe a little bit longer at this point. And basically throughout like 90% of its evolution, the Homo sapien has lived more over in like a hunter-gatherer type of setting, which wasn't that fast-paced. So obviously, you know, you got up, you'd go hunting, you know what I mean? And then you'd chill out, you'd be out in nature all the time. You wouldn't be on your phone all day. Obviously, you wouldn't have deadline after deadline. There would be more camaraderie, more real connection, etc., etc. You'll be out in the sun more often. Obviously, you're only eating wild game, fresh water, etc., etc., which are already put you in the A plus category from a nutrition perspective. Wild crops as well. And the main thing is the central nervous system hasn't evolved too well with dealing with an overabundance or a chronic exposure to micro stresses in life, which a lot of people, especially in Western culture, downplay. So micro stresses will be like, stuck in traffic, having a lot of deadlines at work, um, having being at work with coworkers that you don't necessarily like also adds a tremendous amount of micro stresses as well. Obviously, having a disconnect in your core values, the way you kind of would like to be living your life versus how you are actually living your life, that would provide an abundance of micro stresses. Um, Inflammatory diets, injuries like low back pain, shoulder pain, neck pain provide micro stresses as well. Gut issues, financial issues. I mean, it's endless, but typically micro stresses, I would categorize them as not life threatening, but very persistent when they're chronic, low grade, obviously, low or moderate grade, and just very constant. And the issue is people are like, well, that's not that bad. I'm stuck in traffic and this guy honked at me or whatever. It's not too bad. And in and of itself, on an individual isolated level, it isn't too bad. But the problem is you have like an abundance of these micro stresses turned on all the time. And the central nervous system really isn't that good at dealing with chronic exposure to constant bombardment of different stressors. And it falls apart pretty quickly. So ideally, the central nervous system has evolved to basically looking back at our hunter-gatherer example. You go hunting, it's pretty stressful. Let's say a mammoth, you kill it, and let's say you did lose one of your tribesmen. That's obviously super stressful. But guess what? Especially during the winter time, that huge animal is dead. And then, for a long period of time, you have long periods of not really doing anything, no stressors. You're hanging out, you might be fishing, you're hanging out in the wilderness all day. Basically what normal people do today on vacation 1 week out of the year. That would be done for multiple months out of the year in a hunter-gatherer society, or pretty much all year, for example. So that's ideally how it evolved to function. You have like a huge stressor and then followed by valleys of nothing, and then another huge stressor followed by valleys of nothing. And there's a great book, Robert Sapolsky, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, if you guys want to know more about this subject. It's a great introduction book on the subject. And that's ideally how it's evolved to function. Peak, nothing. Peak, nothing. Today, it's, it depends from person to person, but it's a combination of peak stresses constantly to a combination of low grade stresses constantly or moderate grade stresses constantly. It's just every single level of stress is pretty much chronic in a lot of, especially American citizens these days. I think Robert Kawasaki quoted that 70 or 80% of Americans only have $1,000 to their name. So that's obviously pretty stressful to live that way, because especially if you're in a monetary society, because of the obvious, like you're just one car wreck away from going bankrupt and stuff of that sort, and having no money. So that provides a lot of chronic stress. So as you can see, just reducing those micro stresses will free up a lot of energy, because having an abundance of those micro stresses are extremely draining on your physiology as a whole. And one way to reduce those micro stress are, ironically, actually to start implementing a lot of those time economic tactics we spoke about in section 1 of this live. That's one way. There's a lot more stuff you can do, such as if you have gut health, fix that, if you're working with shitty coworkers or a boss you don't like at work, well, you gotta maybe try working remote initially, or get a new job. It's just something you're gonna have to do, and you're gonna have to be honest with yourself and not kind of downplay it like, it's whatever, I'll change my mind and I'll dissociate or reframe it and stuff of that sort. But deep down inside, you don't want to be there, etc., etc. And sometimes I get it. You got to do some things to get, what you want. But the main thing is you don't want to nest in places you don't want to be. That's where you kind of get in trouble. People get into a position they don't want to be in, and then they kind of really nest there and don't have any game plan of getting out of there. That's when you can get in a lot of trouble. Also, I forgot to totally mention, I forgot to write it over here in terms of time economics. I would recommend, if you can, for your occupation, definitely try to, I think a good idea would be to work remote. This alone would save you a lot of time in terms of having to drive to work and back. Let's say it's like 30 minutes to work, 30 minutes back. So that's an hour a day, 5 days a week. That's 5 hours right there. And 30 minutes is being generous. If you really consider it, driving to work, having to get ready for work, um, having to park in the parking lot, walk to the office, get set up at the office, unpack from the office, walk back to the car, drive back, probably hit traffic on the way back. It could be an hour and a half a day, actually, not even an hour. And that's already 7.5 hours a week. Like right there, save time just by going 100% remote instead of having to drive to the office. And remember, going back to my point, you only need about 10 hours a week of free time to really optimize your mental and physical health for the average person, of course. Okay. So you can see here, just by doing these little teeny things, all of a sudden you have a huge abundance of time, way more than enough time to look your best, feel your best, get enough rest, get enough gym time or whatever, outdoor time, whatever you want. Okay. But the time is there. So obviously you can't use the I don't have time excuse anymore, because it's obvious that you do have time, but you're just not allocating appropriately to health conscious choices. And the only way to do that is to first be honest that you're not doing that. And then once again on the weekend, take a detailed look at your schedule and see where those hours are going, because you do have enough time, especially with all of these tips I just mentioned, which work for me, work for all my clients. And you can see here I'm posting testimonials quite frequently with very busy individuals. It's like, how are they all of a sudden having all this time? Well, we're working on a lot of this stuff and other stuff as well. Okay. So once again, micro stresses, by reducing them, you will free up a lot of energy in your body, and also just have a lot more mental clarity as well. Because if you're just constantly bombarded with one thing after another, that's going to be very draining. So even if you have enough hours in a day, it's just you're going to be really worn down. So once again, I forgot if I mentioned it as well, but micro stress would be gut issues, joint issues. You would want to basically desensitize your lower back if it is hurting, so it's not constantly bothering you all day and providing that micro stress. Sleeping 8 hours a day, mastering, as Paul Chek would say, the 4 doctors, like genuinely mastering them. So what are they? Like eating real food that's not like overly high in abundance of omega-6s. Okay. That will help decrease the inflammation in your body just right there if you just eat real food. So like actual steak, actual chicken, duck, for example, wild fish, vegetables. It doesn't necessarily even have to be organic, just as long as they're whole foods. Not the grocery store, but whole foods in a sense, like the carrot, the broccoli, the apple, the whole fruit, pineapple or whatever. Just as long as you just eat that food, that's already puts you at a huge upgrade. If you take out the alcohol from your life, all the soda, all the juices, all that stuff, it almost becomes really tough to actually become overweight eating actual, just legit only whole food. Okay, even if you're not working out, I would say. So eating that, staying hydrated, make sure you're obviously drinking filtered water these days. That's huge. Out of a tap, I don't know if you've seen how state pipes look, but they're not pretty. So you don't want to be drinking directly out of a tap. And then on top of that, you're getting so many trace amounts of different synthetic chemicals. I use a Berkey. There are a bunch of different filters you can buy. A Berkey is great. I have like an arsenic and also a fluoride filter addition for that as well on top of the carbon filters. It works great for me. I like it, and it keeps the integrity of the water pretty good as well. And stuff of that sort. If you want to really eliminate all of the trace amounts of God knows how many chemicals that are in the water system these days. I mean, a 5-stage reverse osmosis unit might be a good idea, although you'll have to figure out how to bring that water back to life some way, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, using movement as medicine is another doctor, and then getting proper sleep, And all these things are easy to understand, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people on this live are going to be like, oh, yeah, I do that stuff, but I doubt it, you know? I doubt you're really mastering those concepts. You might intellectually be able to understand those concepts, but the intellectual understanding isn't where the power is gained, you know? Knowledge isn't power. Applied knowledge is power. Like, are you really doing that like 6 or 7 days a week? Um, and because 9 out of 10 Americans these days are metabolically unhealthy, I mean, that means 90% of you guys on this call right now are not doing that. You might think you are, but I don't know, you know? Just to be honest, you wouldn't have a lot of excess body fat, various joint issues, various mental issues, et cetera, if you were really honestly, genuinely just mastering those four. Of course, there are a little bit other details and there are no absolutes because everyone is a little bit different on their needs and where they are in their journey, but that is the general principle. I just really highly doubt um, pretty much almost anyone is following these principles to the T. My grandmother that raised me off-grid in Ukraine, she lived to be 87 in perfect health mastering these principles. She didn't have like a life guru, a personal trainer, a nutritionist, a 401k plan, health plan. She just basically lived in the woods her entire life. And she lived in perfect health and never went to the doctors or anything, okay? Um, Old age, 87 as well, all right? So because she just by coincidence, because the environment required it, mastered those concepts. And look at, you know, the American population, for example. They have all this 401k plan, health insurance plan, blah, 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 blah. And there's still 9 out of 10 of them are metabolically unhealthy, 90%, 90%. Um, I think like 60 or 70% of Americans are either overweight or obese. And most of them, I mean, you look at them, they're like a mess. You can see in their face, they're like full of mental and physical pain, left and right. That's their whole entire existence. So obviously, there's something deeply not right systemically, not just with them, but also with the individual as well. And easy things to do are stuff like this to kind of get back to your happiness and health, you know, because what else do you have outside of that? What else do you have? You know, okay, you're killing yourself for a corporate job to finish those deadlines or whatever other bullshit or lies you tell yourself to keep the self-abuse going. And then, you know, the second you get sick or laid off, no one remembers you at work like 2 days later because they're not necessarily they're bad people, but they're just so busy and they got a lot of stuff going on themselves and oftentimes kids, etc. And they just don't have time to check up on you. And some of them, probably a lot of them just genuinely don't give a shit about you as well. So like, why kill yourself for them? You know what I mean? Your job's going to easily find someone else in 2 seconds. And what are you left with? Just a broken mind, broken body, misery, depression. Who cares if you have a house, you know, or whatever savings plan you think you're going to use, et cetera, when you get old enough, and then you're kind of beat up and broken down so much by that age anyway, you can't even enjoy it. So that's that one aspect. So ideally, that is how the central nervous system functions. The general idea is you want to eliminate micro stresses, but then also another aspect of the central nervous system, we talked a lot about external ways to enhance your central nervous system so that you have a lot more abundance of energy and not so overwhelmed. But then there's also like an internal world to attend to as well. So like in brief, like what is the purpose of the central nervous system? Like what purpose does it serve? I mean, in short, it just serves, it just helps you organize around the world and help you navigate the world and the atmosphere, et cetera, so that your biological being can survive and make it to another day. So without the central nervous system, I mean, nothing would be comprehensible. The central nervous system provides you with like an interface. So like this pen right here that I'm holding, obviously we're able to see it because the central nervous system, through various levels of abstraction, is able to show us that this is a pen. But really, without the central nervous system looking at it, it's just like billions of atoms, you know, that are incomprehensible. So a good way to look at it, and I got this from Dr. Hoffman, Donald Hoffman, which has a great research on interface theory, is, you know, the word icon on the desktop. Obviously, everyone can understand what that is. It's kind of like a blue square with a W, and you click on it and you can kind of type stuff on it. But really, if you think about it, that whole entire software doesn't look anything like that. If you look at the HTML code, it's just like a bunch of incomprehensible numbers. And that's how the world would look, for example, without the central nervous system. Just a bunch of incomprehensible numbers where you can't type your essay that you want to type or your report, et cetera, et cetera. So what the central nervous system does is basically dumb everything down through abstraction and inferences, and then make it comprehensible to you so you can kind of navigate the environment around you and increase your chances of survival. And that goes back to the main purpose of the central nervous system, is just to help you survive. And that's it. There's really no other reason for its existence. That's its only purpose, to help you survive. And one way it does that is through creating a personality. And your personality, which you kind of think is you, is really not you at the end of the day. But in short, I'm not going to get into that too much in this conversation too, but I definitely do want to do a live on it because a lot of people get that confused. But basically your personality is formed between the ages of 5 months and 12 months. So before that, the child is basically in this state of essence, and it can't even consciously comprehend that it's a separate entity from its mother or the rest of the universe. It really just thinks it's just one with the whole entire universe, for example, or the void or essence or whatever you want to call it. There are different words for it, but basically one with all of this kind of spaciousness. And then once it starts realizing that it's a separate being, the central nervous system, once again, to enhance your chances of survival, creates a personality. It does this for you. And according to Walensky, it basically creates kind of like a false core, for example. So it makes you think like there are basically 9 different personalities according to Enneagram. And one of them is like the perfectionist, for example. So with that type of personality type, I mean, you're looking at the false core being like, I am imperfect. So the child, its whole entire life, spends its whole entire life trying to avoid this feeling of imperfection by trying to be extra perfect, getting good grades, being really a high achiever, getting good income, et cetera, because his biggest fear is, once again, the fear of imperfection. And obviously with the type 1 personality, and every personality has distinct good features and bad features and various levels of health. There's no like good or bad personality. There's just different personalities, and all of them can be healthy and unhealthy and everything in between. But with the type 1, I mean, some things that could drain a lot of their energy is like a nagging internal critic. And usually, unfortunately, this internal critic for the type 1 is very harsh, And if you really listen to it, if you are a type 1, you'll think about it like, man, I'll never actually speak to other people this way, but I'm speaking to myself this way all the time. So the internal critic typically is very judgmental. So for example, you finished a report and it's pretty solid, but you're like, oh, you could have done better. Or you got a solid income with a promotion, but it provides you a sugar high. A year goes by and you're like, oh, you could be making way more. Or look at you, you're 40 or 50 or whatever, and you're only this far in your career. You know what I mean? Although you are doing actually really well. But this internal nagging critic is just generally very harsh and incessant, just constant. That could be very, very draining on your energy and also just your mood, put you in a bad mood, et cetera, which could be even more draining, which could leave less and less time, rather less energy to attend to your mental and physical health goals, even if you do have the time. But if you combine all that stuff with not having the free time because the individual didn't do all of that stuff we mentioned, you can see how it becomes a disaster like very, very quickly. And from my observation and my experience, I mean, the typical path for a Western person is then just to go to their medical doctor and they're having like anxiety, for example, and they prescribe anti-anxiety medications. But how does that solve all of this stuff we talked about? You know what I mean? Which is where true healing basically happens, when all of these changes occur. And more important, when you change the person that's causing all the person's problems. That's inevitably what's going to stop the problems. Like I always say, if you have a rock stuck inside your shoe, take the rock out and walk pain-free. Stop keeping the rock there and taking painkillers instead. Obviously, it's silly to do that, but people do that all the time in so many different aspects of their life. And then they wonder why they're getting sicker and more beat up, and they look 10 years older than they actually are, and they're on like 5 medical drugs last year, and now they're on 10, and they feel and look even worse than they are now. They have this huge gut, and you know what I mean? It's endless, and these skin problems, etc., etc. And they're like, where is this coming from? Like, what's going on, you know? And I'm like, come on. From my observation, it's like you're doing it to yourself. And the good news is you can stop. You can stop doing it to yourself anytime you want. You know what I mean? And sometimes I know I had to hire a lot of mentors throughout my life to help me because it's you can't know everything, you know? And it's not fair for you to put that much pressure on yourself to try to figure everything out yourself. So some things to consider, you know? Obviously, the type 1 also has like um, a lot of anger and shame in that type of personality type. So that could be very draining on the energy, leaving less energy available to actually do things that are beneficial to you. So that would have to be addressed as well, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope this clears up, you know, the strategies of time economics and how to free up a lot of time during your week to help attend to things that are actually going to benefit you, you know, your mental and physical health. I mean, think about it. If you lose those two things, um, like what else do you got, you know? You pretty much don't have anything else. So the sad part is somehow um, the American dream has convinced people that uh, everything that's not important is important, and everything that's uh, is important is not important. So, like for example, like oh, you know, yeah, go, you know, kill yourself for your job because you got to do this and you got to have this retirement and this and that. Um, but yeah, you know, sleeping well, taking care of yourself, looking respectable. Oh, yeah, that's not important. You know what I mean? Or that can go in second place, but really it's like in seventh or eighth place for most people. And then you get your typical story, you know, 40 years old, 50 years old, director of a company. You got an okay house, you know, you got a nice car, but you're depressed, you know, you need like a bottle of Xanax and 5 Red Bulls to even have enough energy to clean your dishes in the morning and go to work, and you still feel like shit and you look terrible and you wonder what's going on, you know, and you feel more empty than ever before, although objectively, um, everything's such a so great, et cetera, et cetera. Like especially like on LinkedIn, just kind of like a platform I don't like too much because it's so sad. You see like so many people, they're like smiling in their profiles and they're like super happy. But you know, like especially when I gave corporate health lectures, I mean, the health in those environments is disastrous. Those people, for the most part, are living so out of alignment with their natural evolution. Um, you can totally see it right off the bat. And I remember giving corporate health lectures and thinking like, man, the only way to really optimize people's health in these corporate health lectures is tell them to leave the corporate environment. At least how it's being done today, okay? You could do good damage control if you're really consciously aware of your mental and physical health in those environments, but I don't know if it's possible with all the social politics, the bureaucracy, um, the fact that most people get into those occupations too because of like confusion about what they want in life or just out of desperation for some kind of safety and security and daddy figures, et cetera, et cetera. And then they grow disgruntled towards their work and then they carry that out and you can feel that energy in the work. And it's just not pleasant all around. Okay. So, I mean, there's so many other things we can touch on in this topic, but the most important takeaway, I guess, here is to look at any issue holistically, even the most minor physical and health issue. You will see what have to be tackled through like 7, 8, 9 different variables all at once to really have a complete resolution of that symptom. And don't think just like, you know, oh, you know, like I have high blood pressure. I'm going to go on high blood pressure medication and everything will be fine. Well, you know, look at it this way. The belief system that led to you having high blood pressure is going to lead you to a myriad of other mental and physical health issues in your life sometime down the line. So, um, you know, okay, you took high blood pressure medication today, but you know, you got cancer 5 years later. Okay, good luck. You know, what's your strategy then? Just being on running after symptom after symptom after symptom your entire life, and then wondering why you keep getting sicker and looking worse and worse year after year and looking more and more worn down and on more and more drugs. Like That's it. That's basically the only solution once you kind of get away from getting to the etiology of what's causing all these issues. And the majority of the time, pretty much all of the time, from my observation, the thing that's causing all these issues is the person through their lifestyle choices. And then obviously you got to go a little deeper and figure out what led to that belief system and why that's okay in that person's life now, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot to it, but I hope that shines clarity on what real healthcare actually looks like as well, because that's the only way to really come to a complete resolution of pretty much the majority of symptoms that are byproducts of poor lifestyle and nutritional choices. So wishing you guys the best this weekend. Thank you for jumping in. Amet, good to see you. Marius, Lewis, Dean, Army, Mitchell, Joseph, Walter, good to see you as well. Don't know how to pronounce a few of your guys' names, but Bruno, Preston, I'll pronounce the easy ones. Eric, JP. So everyone, thanks for jumping in, and have a good weekend, okay? Take care.